Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Well, hello and welcome. This is the today's Talk to the Doc podcast, the show that helps executives educate themselves more on technology and all the different things that surround it. You don't have to know it all, but you do have to know just enough. I'm your host, Steve, the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is in. In the office with me today is Kellye Kamp, and I really just enjoyed my pre-call with her. Kellye's an AI strategy architect from SourceKamp, and it's AI for all. So, that includes you. And we've got an awesome discussion planned today. Now think of Kellye as kind of a Prometheus. She's a writer, speaker, and a consultant helping organizations kind of get into generative AI. Not just the technology, but how it could impact operations, marketing, education. She's been all over the place. She's nationally recognized, and the thing I really liked is she really does take the human first. She takes the human part of AI and makes sure that you're part of that journey. So today, for our topic, we plan to chat just a little bit about how small and medium-sized businesses can use AI tools to do all those things we want to do. Reduce workload, automate processes, engage with our clients more deeply. And the best part, she says she can do it all without needing technical skills or a big budget. So, Kellye, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for inviting me, Steve.
Well, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your, what I'm sure is an extremely busy day and week and month all the time. With all the changes in AI, I'm sure it keeps you hopping.
It does, for sure. It's really the pipeline is starting to fill up very quickly.
Now, before we get started, I'd like to kind of just get into some numbers. I always like to try and get a sense of what the numbers are. I'm a numbers-driven business manager. So let's start off with the pulse. Kind of give me a sense of what are SMBs doing with AI?
It's really interesting. Most of the businesses I'm talking to are talking about it, but they're not really pulling the trigger as an organization. They clearly have a lot of individuals within the organization that are playing with tools like ChatGPT or Gemini or Microsoft Office tools, Copilot, but many of them don't quite know how to use it other than write a simple email or review a document. So that's what I do is I come in and I just help take them to the very next level and show them how powerful these tools really are.
Gotcha. Now, are you concerned when people are using different tools? What's your advice around that?
Not at all. I think it's very personal to find the tool that fits you the best, that feels the most comfortable to you, especially when you're learning something new. So I don't get really upset if somebody's using a tool that's not my go-to. But I do my go-to is ChatGPT, only for the reason that it is so multimodal. And I do have a lot of businesses now that are asking me to come in and coach them on Copilot very specifically because a lot of their office systems are built on that. And I think Copilot is a great platform. It does a lot, but it's almost like I don't like to start people out on Copilot because it does give you the prompts. It's almost spoon feeding you the prompts, which when you're starting out is great. But a few months into it, a year into it, you're still not really learning how to truly utilize the large language model. So for that reason, I'll coach them on Copilot, but I'll also teach them ChatGPT at the same time. And there might be
Gotcha.
2 or 3 other tools that I'll educate them on as well, just so they've got a really well-rounded education about how all the tools work and which ones are best for which skill sets.
Now it sounds like you're almost preferring kind of the more open. You can do whatever you want to with it because it frees you to brainstorm more. It's not as leading. Is that kind of what I'm understanding?
Well, when I say multimodal, it just does a lot of different things, which most of the models are getting that way. But chat was sort of the first one out of the gate. And so they're always just a couple of steps ahead of the others as far as, what's next, improving the tools, working out the bugs, things like that, just like any company, right? Usually the first one to market always has a little bit of a leading edge. So that's how I feel about chat. But, you can, most of them are multimodal, meaning you can create art, you can write, you can do research, you can analyze data. Most of them are there now, but 6 months ago, they were not. So I was
Definitely.
imprinted with ChatGPT, I guess, and that's the one that I go to the most. But I will tell you, it's not a bad idea to get familiar with at least the top 3 or 4. So when I'm doing research, for example, I'll open all 4 or 5 of the top large language models out there, and I'll give them the same prompt. And just to ensure that I'm getting consistent answers, and some will give a more broad answer, some will give more specific information, some will source the information. So I just like to encourage people to really get familiar with at least 3 or 4 of them, just a working knowledge, and use them all because it really is like tools in a toolbox. Sometimes you need a hammer, sometimes you need a screwdriver, sometimes you need a Swiss Army knife. And that's how I look at these tools.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's the case for all technology. That it depends on the situation and the need, the context, and knowing all the different tools kind of helps you make sure you're pulling the right one out of the toolbox.
That's right.
Copilot is built upon the open AI technology, so definitely ChatGPT had a huge lead there, and Microsoft has its own LLM, but they're really focusing on the business network and that side of thing. And I think you're right. That's really where the value is, but there's just so much out there already for ChatGPT. It makes it, well, I guess all the tools, every day there's an announcement from one or the other about what barrier they've broken, what they've added, a new agentic function or whatever it happens to be. They're all evolving.
That's right. Literally every single day, they're coming up with updates and new features and trying to outdo each other, which is great for us as
Right.
somebody who's the user. It forces them to be very, very competitive. But it is
As long as they don't start rolling up.
Yes, right.
Now let's talk heart rate. So heart rate to me would kind of be like, I guess what are the benefits from like even the most basic AI tools? What should a small business or local government entity expect out of embracing that?
Well, first of all, I always want to start by saying AI, any kind of generative AI or AI at all, does not replace a human being. It just doesn't. I like to think of it more as an assistant to the human being that I am. It's going to take all of those tedious, mind-numbing tasks that I usually dread doing and don't really want to spend my time on, and let the generative AI do those simple tasks for me so I can focus on the more essential work. So I think it's really important to see the tools that way rather than, I can just use AI and not hire 2 more people. There's a limit to that. There are only so many things that large language model can do that sometimes you just need a human in the loop to do it.
Gotcha. So it's kind of that coworker that you've trained, but it still needs you to train it to be that coworker for you to know how you like things, how you want things, and so forth.
Definitely. A lot of times I'll say it's almost like a word calculator. I mean, a calculator is great at calculating really deep, hard math for us, but until we tell it what we want it to calculate, it's kind of a worthless tool. So generative AI is exactly the same way. If we don't tell it what we want, then it's kind of a useless tool.
I have to tell you, for our clients, I did a presentation early on, some of the early days, and I described AI as why AI is like your drinking buddy. And that was because sometimes it was extremely perceptive and got to the heart of exactly what you wanted. And other times it like answered a completely different question than what I was asking. I'm like, what are you talking about? But
Right.
anyways, I like your idea that, about it being a coworker, and you kind of make it better or don't improve it as much, and it's not as good for you if you don't
That's
invest
right.
the effort.
Honestly, it really is like having an intern, which, most interns they're sharp, they're young, their minds are fresh, they're eager to learn, and they're willing to do anything for you. But you have to be specific because they don't know you, they don't know your business, and they can't read your mind. And so the more vague you are with your instruction, the more disappointed you're going to be with the results they bring back.
Right.
And that's exactly how AI works. The more specific we are, then the better the results are going to be.
Okay, that sounds like a great tip for our audience once they do get in. Is make sure you're embracing a lot of specificity and what you're after, how you want it, those kinds of things to actually get what you're after.
Yes, definitely.
The next statistic, weight. I guess I'm trying to think of how are organizations getting ROI?
Well, once they start to embrace these tools and really learn how to leverage them, the ROI is amazing. I've got several case studies that I've done that I've pulled stats on, talking to the client. I always interview them after the projects that we're working on to see how well whatever we've created is working for them. And the stats they're pretty staggering. I mean, I would say generally they're seeing an improvement or an ROI anywhere from 10% financially, 10% to 30%, usually pretty quickly within the first couple of months. As far as productivity, it can go as high as 70%,
That's pretty
depending
amazing.
on what we're building out for them. So a lot of times I wrote an article on LinkedIn about this a couple of weeks ago about stepping over
Okay.
something in a pile of books that's been in the floor for so long we don't see it anymore. And it sounds kind of silly, but we all in our business have those things that we have just learned to step over or work around that we literally don't see anymore because we've been stepping around them for so long. So it might be a process that, oh my gosh, I've got to transfer the same data into 3 different platforms before the person who needs it actually can access it. Well, you get so used to putting it into those 3 formats that it's just part of the job. You just don't think about it anymore. But generative AI can come in and say, wow, we can cut that down to 1 step so that you're spending less time transferring data, the end user has it faster, and the workflow can move much more efficiently. So sometimes it can be a pretty significant ROI in that respect.
I could see that just having that cognitive predisposition or believing things are a certain way. You spend so much time learning a process, you don't think as much about breaking the process once you figured it out.
That's right.
I think in the risk assessment world for cybersecurity, I used to call it the external eye. That sometimes you can be the sharpest guy, have the best design network, have everything set up, and miss something small just because of the value of that external eye.
Right. I think that's excellent. Yes.
Well, on to the doctor's visit. Where do organizations start? When I think of our audience, typically they're not run by a CIO or a CISO or someone technical. It's typically someone who's an expert at management, operations, something else. Where would you recommend they begin?
Well, first and foremost, I recommend if you really don't know much about it, or even if you think you do, I think it's never a bad idea to take an online course. There are plenty out there that are free of charge. And, they might say they take 10 hours to complete, but if you really just, stick to it, it might take you a day and a half of uninterrupted time to just plow through that course. But some of them are really, really good and informative and will just give you a broader perspective of the things you can ask of generative AI. I think that's the secret sauce is one, knowing what to ask and then how to ask it. The second recommendation I have is get into community and learn with other people because now there's just so much out there. It's so overwhelming to know where to start or what to focus on or what's going to benefit me. Is when you're learning with other people who are also learning, one, it just makes it a lot more fun. And two, you're going to learn from other people who have different interests than you. I'm in an amazing organization. We meet online on social media sites, and there's
Oh, nice.
probably about anywhere from 40 to 100 of us in there on any given night. We actually meet 5 nights a week for
Now that's commitment.
about 2 to 2.5 hours a night. Now, obviously, it's come and go. It's social media. You don't have to be there. It doesn't cost anything to join. But I've been in that room for 2 years now, every single night. And there's no way I could be as affluent in this large language model language if I was learning all of that on my own. So I may hear from somebody who's really, really technical, has a doctorate in IT, and they're talking way over my head, but I'm learning things through osmosis just by being part of the conversation. And then there are other people who have never even heard of ChatGPT. They're wanting to start for the very first time. And just even hearing their questions is a great refresher for me to go, oh yeah, I forgot I could ask it that, or I forgot it could do something like that. And then, of course, most of that is in between. But I think just getting into a community where you feel comfortable, where you feel not judged, and you can ask questions and you can learn from other people is an excellent way to just get started.
Excellent. So that sounds like great advice to me. That in your adoption journey for AI, make sure you have peers. Just like peer groups or others. Mm-hmm. If you're in a specific industry and you've got an industry association, maybe they've got an AI special interest group or content that they put out there for you, or maybe you are in a peer group. Bring up that topic and make sure it's top of mind. But mm-hmm. You couldn't embrace the microcomputer, you couldn't embrace networking, you couldn't embrace cybersecurity unless you had some sort of coaching or leadership or guidance. Otherwise, it was an always uphill kind of battle.
That's right.
And I do think that AI is such a different beast. It's such a different beast to me that it really takes a lot more guidance, I think, than perhaps some other technologies and stuff I've been exposed to.
I would agree with that. I mean, it's something when I'm speaking to groups, I say it's almost like we're learning a language that no one has ever spoken before. And there's no textbook with vocabulary words teaching you how to learn the language. I mean, it really is a whole new ball game this time. But I think that's equally important I think that's one of the hardest things is to find somebody who actually knows generative AI if you want a coach or you're looking for someone to help you in your business. I think right now it's really critical to know how to vet the people that are out there, because I know a lot of people who claim to be AI experts because they wrote a prompt book using ChatGPT and they're now selling it on Amazon. And
sure,
nothing against that. I mean, great for those people who can make some money doing that. But there's a big difference between using chat to create something entirely for you with little to zero input versus somebody who has been in the game for a while and is actively using the tools and pushing the boundaries and asking the deeper questions and learning from others. I think that's really critical right now is just to know who's legit and who's not.
Okay, so I kind of hear you saying being able to prompt well is good, all in good, but you do a good job of starting with why, trying to understand the organization, their situation, and that adds more power to when you're ready for the prompt of understanding what you're actually after.
Definitely. You always have to start with the problem, right? You don't start with the technology. You have to understand what challenge you're trying to solve, how you want to solve it, what that roadmap looks like. I mean, you really still have to do business the same way we've always done business. That part has not changed. But if you can once you know your roadmap and you can bring in a tool that can help get you there faster, then I think that's the secret.
Gotcha. Okay. So from what you're seeing, it sounds like, you're talking to a lot of small and mid-sized organizations. You're embracing with them on understanding their organization and their challenges. What are some of the what are some of the most common challenges or opportunities you're seeing from SMBs right now?
A lot of it. I mean, I'm literally at this point working with every vertical I have is different. I've not
Okay.
done projects for two organizations in the same vertical yet, which I kind of love because I like to know a little bit about everything, right?
Sure.
But like I say, some things are very consistent. You have to know what challenge you're trying to solve. You have to know who the decision makers are.
Gotcha.
That part is no different. But a lot of things that people are coming to me with, it's always interesting. Our very first conversation, they want to solve the biggest, most audacious challenge they have in their business, or
Okay.
prospecting. That's another big one. How do I find 3,000 brand new clients that I've never heard of before? And, AI is not great at solving those challenges yet. That still takes a human in the loop because those are human relationships that we're developing, right? Now, AI can certainly go and help you do some research to find new companies or to target specific area codes, things like that. But that part is really still very relational. And I don't encourage people to use AI that way that quickly. My recommendation to a new client is let's find some internal challenges that your office is working with or working around. And let's start with a proof of concept project that's a little bit smaller. There's no client facing conflict. So if we don't get it exactly right the first time, or we get halfway through and your brain starts churning all these new ideas and you want to pivot suddenly, there's no impact. There's no risk to that, right? We can easily pivot if it's an internal process and it's not affecting anybody outside the company. And
Okay.
then when they start to change their mind about, well, what could I fix for myself first? Kind of like put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Then they start to realize there's a number of challenges that their office is facing every day. Again, that they're so used to stepping over, they've kind of forgotten it's a problem. And once we solve that first challenge, that's the low hanging fruit, very low risk, it's not client facing, there's nothing bad is going to happen if you suddenly change your mind in midstream or we pivot or whatever. Then they start to realize how many of these things they're stepping over every day. And it may not be solving their external challenges, but if it's giving you back 2 to 3 hours a day in your workday, then maybe you have time to go do the prospecting you want to do, and you have time to work on those personal relationships because you're not in the weeds with all of the busy work. So that's my biggest recommendation.
Yeah, I can really see it. As a small business owner myself, one of my biggest hates is there's not enough of me to go around, and I'm sure every leader, manager, executive in here feels the same way. That there's only so much of me that can go around. I can't afford to hire another me. So how can I grow my own mini me that kind of helps me through all the stuff I need to get through in a week at a time?
Right. That's exactly right. I actually spoke to a group of dentists a couple of months ago, and I showed them how, well, first of all, I did my research and I found out that their front office staff spends a majority, I mean, maybe not a majority of their time, but a great deal of their time just making phone calls and writing emails to customers who are slow to pay. Right? They've already sent the billing out. Maybe they have a company that does that, but now they've got to personally follow up with a phone call or an email and try to convince this patient to pay their bill. And you can imagine how much time and effort and hours out of the day that takes away from things they should be doing, like checking in patients or making sure that the billing is placed correctly. So I showed them how to generate an email, a basic letter. They could even make 3 or 4 or 5 different basic email letters, depending on the circumstance, but how we can build that as a GPT, there's a new term, which is a customized chat, basically. But I showed them how we could create like kind of the perfect email, but then customize it automatically. And just putting in some placeholders and telling chat this is the data that's going to change. So based on the client's history, and I'll just give you one sentence about their history. rewrite a customized email for me. And it's literally done in 4 seconds instead of 20, 25, 30 minutes. And when you can start to generate that kind of production, just reaching out to non-paying clients, and your staff, 3 of your staff members are each getting 2.5 hours back a day, that's significant, I think.
Yeah, I think especially, you were talking about not doing huge impact things that could potentially have quality control issues, but things like writing letters, things like creating things for you where you have the final say, that feeds right into your comment about, hey, don't bet the business on AI yet. It's still something that needs your involvement, and starting small, finding areas where you can start saving time right away, get you that immediate ROI to eventually have the time to work on the bigger, deeper, long-tailed problems.
Definitely. And it's also giving you a little bit of a runway for education. You're going to learn a lot by working with someone like me, for example, because I absolutely involve my clients in the process of building out that customized tool for them. I'm not necessarily an expert in their field. They are. And they're an expert in knowing what problem they need to solve. So unlike the old days where you spent a day with a consultant and you sent them off for 3 months and they came back with this big fat proposal and you're thinking, okay, 80% of this doesn't even apply to us or isn't really what we're trying to solve. Now you've wasted a lot of time and money and effort. This way, I actually sit down and work with my clients. They'll tell me what their goal is. I'll build something out, kind of like a light version. I come back to them, and oftentimes it's an immediate conversation of back and forth. And once I understand what they're trying to solve, how they're wanting to solve it, what they want their end result to be, then we're building that automation together. And within a couple of days, it's done. They don't have to wait for me to come back just to realize that I haven't really done what they've asked. And they're going to see immediate results. Like literally the minute that they have that in their hands, they're going to see results.
Nice. Now you brought up education. Let's dive a little bit more into that. So far we've talked about a key executive or some internal champion for your AI initiatives, kind of getting some education for themselves. Give me your who, what, when, where, how of other people in the organization.
Are you meaning clients, people within their internal organizations, or can you rephrase that for me?
Yeah. So you talked about educating a top executive. Is there any education you have to do for everybody else on the team that may be using the tool
Definitely.
or might have other ideas?
Definitely. I mean, it does help to start with the person at the top, the decision maker, because it's the trickle down method. If the person at the top is digging his heels in and crossing his arms and not excited about this technology, then it's going to be very hard for the rest of the organization to get on board. But I think it's good to either learn together or maybe educate the person, the decision maker first, just enough so they understand how important this education is. And then, of course, it can be customized to that organization pretty easily. Once he's on board and he sees the potential and he starts to get the buy-in from the rest of the team, then I think the next step is essential to come in and start educating the employees as well. Because again, you have to have buy-in, and people are not going to buy into something that they're fearful of and don't really know what it is and how to use it. So I do a lot of educating on that as well. I can come into an organization, I can do a workshop. It can be for a couple of hours a day. It can be, for 2 whole days if they just want to do a deep dive quickly. But I can give them instant tools and instant ways of using that for their specific organization that they can start using immediately. And getting rid of that fear factor is my number one goal. Anytime I'm doing a speaking event or coaching or training an organization, you've got to get the fear out of the way. You've got to answer their questions, because if they're fearful, they're not going to hear one thing I'm trying to teach. So
Sure.
I'm very cognizant of that. And I remember how scared I was when I started. I've never forgotten that. So I'm very empathetic to that fear. And it's a real thing. And there are things that need to be addressed. And an understanding of how these large language large language tools work, what they do and what they don't do. So I think that part of the education is really important from the very beginning.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely see where it's important for the executive to see the use case, see the possibilities, know what problems they're trying to address, and help prioritize that. Mm-hmm. But as far as the implementation operationally, you really need the rest of the team on board and help innovate, improve, look for other opportunities to connect, to share, to provide, whatever it is that you're trying to get out of your AI.
Right. And again, that's just a natural environment to create that crowdsourcing for learning. To me, that's really exciting. If you can coach, 2 or 3 people within the organization, get them up to speed and get them excited to become ambassadors for this technology, then it's fun for them as well to start to coach and educate their team members. And it can really be powerful.
Now, I'm curious if you have a preference. I've heard it both ways. I've heard some people say it's best to start in one department mm-hmm. where everybody's sharing all the like types of issues. I've also heard it's better to get a crosshatch of the organization. So you've got people from different departments, so you can also understand interconnectivity and those kinds of things. Do you have a preference one way or the other?
A lot of it does come down to culture. And I think it's just a matter of knowing my client, and what their actual culture is. But personally, if I had my druthers, I would try to assess who the top, say, 5 people are in the organization that are the most curious and the most willing to learn something new, and the most willing to pivot quickly if they hit a dead-end road. Because not everybody's built like that. And it takes a special person to hit a wall 10 times. And yes, it's frustrating, but I'm going to try it the 11th time, right? Because that's usually the time you're going to get over that wall. So personally, I think it's really important to try to find those people within an organization, get your ambassadors, your evangelists who are excited about using the tool first, and show them the power. And then it's going to spread through the organization pretty quickly.
Gotcha. So it's kind of the Charles Darwin philosophy. I think when I first heard Charles Darwin and I heard survival of the fittest, I always assumed that meant the strongest. Mm-hmm. It wasn't until later I found out that what he meant by fittest was those with the ability to adapt. And so you're identifying your signposts, your critical pivot points, those people who know the business, can adapt on the fly, can help you embrace what you need to do, and help you get to what you're after.
Yes, definitely. I think curiosity is the number one trait someone needs to have to really embrace this technology.
Awesome. I like that. Well, on the thinking curiosity, help me understand for the audience, what are some of the fears versus facts, the things we worry about, the things that are true.
Mm-hmm. I think the number one fear that I hear is people say, oh, it's going to steal my data and it's going to copy it and use it. And actually, that's what the word generative means in Chat GPT. The G stands for generative. And that means it's generating something new every time. It doesn't even really have the ability to copy and paste in the way we think of copying and pasting. So even though your data is out there, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be wary about what data you're putting out into a large language model. It's just like the internet. You would never put your social security out on the internet for anybody to find, right? And so I think of large language models in the same way. I'm very sensitive about the data that I'm putting into them. On the other side of that coin, it's almost like writing my name on a grain of sand and throwing it into the ocean. Yes, it's out there, but the chances of somebody finding that particular grain of sand and then taking the trouble to do something with it and manipulate it and try to pull something out of it that's not even really built to output, the odds are pretty slim. So again, I do say we need to use caution with whatever we're uploading into a large language model, especially for businesses, because so much of their information is private. We don't want the public to have everything. However, large language models do not copy and paste. That's not how they're built. They may train off of it, which means they're taking the collective knowledge out there, and building something new from it. So if I say I want a typical invoice from a CPA to their client, they're not going to give me Joe the accountant's invoice that he's created. They're going to take Joe's invoice and John's invoice and 5 million other people's invoices to get a collective knowledge of what an accountant's invoice looks like. And then it's going to create a brand new invoice. So that's the biggest fear, I think, is people think it's going to steal their data. It's not really even built to do that.
So just to make sure I understand what you're saying there, you're saying be less afraid about something you're typing in there being parroted back to someone else somewhere.
Correct.
But you still should be afraid of if you've got proprietary systems or marketing information or programs that you don't want the model to learn from and somehow incorporate that into the generated possibilities, then those are the kinds of things you want to be worried about.
Well, and I wouldn't even go as far as saying worried. I would just say be cautious. For example, and this has been several months ago, maybe close to a year ago, the New York Times contacted OpenAI, who builds ChatGPT, and said, we don't want you training on our data and we're not going to give it to you. And they're like, that's fine because we've got a million other pieces of data to train on. We don't even need your data because they've already got so much. So if they're saying we don't need the New York Times, I think that's pretty significant because if they don't need the New York Times, they probably don't need your data either.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking about, when I think about fears, I always think about the, early on when I first started learning AI, they always talked about proper punctuation and being nice and friendly and using question marks on a question and not just ignoring the punctuation at all. And I thought, well, are you sure it's not just because they're afraid of, hey, what if it does turn out to be the Terminator? I want to be nice to him.
Right. Yes.
He was one of the good ones before we turned.
That's right. Yes. So generative AI is not robotic AI, and that is a clear distinction I like to make. It's also not machine learning AI. So those are the three distinct parts of this big umbrella that everybody loves to throw all of those AI units into one big lump. And it's just not true. So robotic AI definitely focuses on those, humanoid looking robots to do human type tasks. And some of them are good and some of them can be a little scary. I totally understand that. And I have a line in the sand that I've drawn for myself in relation to robotics. There's some things I don't want to. Yes, I wanted to vacuum my floors, but I don't really like the idea of a humanoid 6-foot robotic character sitting in my closet overnight recharging while I'm sleeping. That creeps me out too.
Yeah.
But
I think we watched enough Star Trek to all be worried about that cautionary tale.
We saw a lot of movies that put a lot of fear into us. But that is important to know the distinction between the different types of AI, because generative AI, like I said, is really just used to generate a new report or a new analysis of your data. It's not even built to copy and paste.
So I know it's not a big fear or worry in your mind, but should the users be vetting or testing tools in some way, or what are your thoughts there?
I think so, for sure. So I had a client who was doing some deep medical research on a new way to sterilize surgical tools. So we had to get it right. It was going through the FDA. It was being looked at by the military. It was a pretty big project. And I'm not just going to type in anything to any tool and, take it for granted that they're giving me the right data. And this was also about a year ago when the tools were still really new and really needed to be worked through. They're much better now. But in that specific circumstance, I would open up 5 different large language models: Claude, ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, and Perplexity. They all do something a little bit differently, but I would type in the exact same prompt and then see what the difference was in the results. And that's really how I learned how different these tools are and how what they're best at and what they're not so good at. So it was real. I think that's very helpful if you're doing some deep research, or even if you're not, if you just want to test the tools and see what makes them different. I think that's a great way to do it. Just put in the same prompt. You can just say, help me organize my grocery list and organize it by the store's layout. Even something that simple, you're going to see pretty quickly how different these tools process the data and what the different output is for each one. And you're going to find the one that works best for you.
Now, I have seen in recent months a lot more AI models talking about deep research, deep thinking, deep thought, whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit more about that to our audience so they can kind of understand what's happening out of that functionality just in general?
Well, I joke a lot that I don't really have a lot of things in my life that need deep research. I don't know what that says about me. But up to this point, I'm not a scientist. I'm not doing medical research for myself. I'm not really needing those tools. It's almost like saying I don't need a chainsaw when a kitchen knife will do. So I've worked with those a little bit. I've tested them a little bit, but I don't really have a good use case for testing those particular models. So I'm not that experienced with them yet. Now, obviously, if I have a client who's in the scientific world and they're wanting to do some deeper research other than what Google can provide for them, or for what just a basic large language model can provide, then it is very good at kind of going a lot deeper into those very specific kinds of research, specifically for science, medicine, things like that. And that's what those models are built for. But for the everyday person who's just using it for their business, that's usually not necessary to use it. It's probably going to give you more information than you really want or need. And it may not even address your particular question well if your question's not built for deep research.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can definitely see where, for generative AI, you're trying to strike that balance between answering quickly and answering accurately. And, taking that extra time to do a more accurate answer might throw out something even wilder or something else out there as it searches the internet for scholarly articles or whatever it's trying to research out of versus, pulling something from Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it.
Right. Well,
so
and just using that,
there's just so much stuff out there.
So much. And just using that chainsaw analogy, if you're 5 years old, if you're new to learning these tools, you probably don't want to start with a chainsaw, right?
Right.
You probably want to start with a smaller tool that's still going to, some scissors, for example. It's still going to cut something for you, but you don't necessarily need that high-powered a tool to help you get where you need to go. So it's okay to start with just a basic large language model and start there and play and push it to its limits. And if it's still not giving you what you want, then maybe you go to the deep research. But with any of them, it really is about knowing what question to ask and how to ask that question properly. And Google has, when Google came along, it was the greatest thing since sliced bread because we'd never had anything like that before for research. But what Google has trained us to do is to create a prompt that's 3 to 5 words long. And then it still doesn't give us an answer. It gives us links to articles. And I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one who's too lazy to read more than 2 or 3 articles.
Right.
And peruse those quickly and then still not have an answer. So I'm really just taking that limited information and coming up with my own idea or my own answer and hoping for the best. So these large language tools are really so much better at giving us an actual answer than we've had before. But you still, because we've been trained to not ask big questions or ask it in 3 to 5 words, we've become trained to be very vague in our description of the answer that we want. I'll give you a quick example. One thing that I share with my clients is if I said, Steve, would you run over to Starbucks and get me a cold drink? You're going to bring me back a cold drink, but the chances of it being exactly what I want are slim to none, right? Especially because I'm a woman and I'm high maintenance. So you're probably not going to get it right. But if I asked you to run over there and get me a venti mocha frappuccino made with almond milk with whipped cream and chocolate drizzle and a splash of hazelnut in it, Now you're going to bring me back exactly what I want. So most of us are still asking for a cold beverage and not asking for what we really want. And then we're a little bit disappointed when we don't get the results. So that's a good way to think about it.
Okay. And I can say for sure as a guy that I'm used to getting it wrong regardless. So, there's two sides to that coin as far as getting exactly what's desired.
That's right. But hopefully with generative AI, we're going to learn to ask for what we want in more of a conversational tone and not in the shortest possible way. I can tell you that when I first started prompting like that, more of a conversation, it felt really cumbersome. And oh my gosh, this, how many words do I need to give it, right? But when you start to think of it as your intern or as your assistant, you don't have an intern or an assistant and give them in 3 to 5 words the annual report that you're expecting. You're going to give them some context and you're going to give them some detail. And you know that if you don't do that, they're not going to bring you back anything that you want to look at. So just think of it in the same way. Rather than being cumbersome, just saying, I'm going to put in a little extra work into this conversation up front, and then I don't have to do so much on the back end.
Now, I think that's a trade-off. When I switched from Google Foo to Copilot Foo, is I used to just, a lot of Google Foo is who does a better job of SEO, and that's the stuff that's popping up that I have to read. But AI Foo or Copilot Foo, when it's looking through or Chat GPT, whatever, it's looking for commonalities. It's looking for all those other things. So I don't see as much thrown up there like I used to with Google. Mm-hmm. But I'm closer to the answer that I want right off the bat.
Right. Yeah,
assuming I queried better.
Right. Just give it some context and some in more detail than you're used to giving Google. And just think of it as a friend or an intern or somebody who just walked into your business for the first time today. They can't read your mind, but they're very, very smart. If you'll just spend a little bit more time explaining what it is you're trying to accomplish and give it some context, then I think your results are immediately going to get exponentially better.
Now, aside from the tools and testing and all those kinds of things, are you typically bringing in AI to replace workflows or building them into workflows? How are you trying to figure out the best way to bring that into an organization?
Well, I start with myself. I'm my own best test case, right? So I'll be sitting, for example, I'll have 20 emails that I need to put out. And because I'm sort of trained the same way the rest of us are, I'll start out by saying, okay, let me write an email to the first one, and that takes 45 minutes. And then I'm going to write a custom email to the second person. And then usually by the second one, I go, okay, Kellye, you don't have to do this. You can build yourself a GPT, which will automate this letter. You can still customize it within the GPT, in the back end of the GPT. But now I can write one fabulous letter, give it some placeholders where I want the information to change and be customized. And now I can write 20 emails in 5 minutes instead of, 2 hours. Now, to be fair, I'm probably going to spend a good 30, 45 minutes on that first email to actually build out that GPT. But once that's built, it's smooth sailing from there on. So it does require work. I tell people there's an easy button and there's a magic button. AI definitely will give you an easy button, but there's no such thing as a magic button. We still have to do some of the work.
See, to me, it sounds like an invest button. I'm putting in a little bit more time up front. I'm trying to figure out the right prompt. But in the future, once I get it, then I can make minor tweaks to that prompt, and more. It's doing the hard work for me once I kind of get my basic framework figured out.
That's exactly right. And you can always go back and tweak it if in 5 days you go, oh, I thought of a better way to do this. You don't have to start from scratch. You can just go rework what you've already built the first time. And again, exponentially, that time starts to add up, and the ROI on the savings of that is pretty significant.
Yeah, using your intern example before, hey, I brought this intern on board. I spent 8 hours a day with them for a month, and now they read my mind. They know exactly what I want, as opposed to I brought an intern on. I had them watch videos, had them do these other things, and they don't seem to be very good at their job. it sounds like it's the time you put in makes a huge difference.
It is. And that's why I encourage companies every day, don't think you're going to replace your employees with generative AI. You have already invested so much time and so much money into training that person, to understanding that person, them understanding your organization. They've got an education more than likely. I mean, there's a lot of investment there. And to say, oh, AI can just take your place, I think is really dangerous and really a falsehood. But what if you had that employee that you have invested so much time and energy and money into, and you make them a superpower by giving them a tool that's going to just make everything they do that much faster, that much better, that much more accurate? So I really, really encourage companies, before you do anything, don't get rid of your people. Just don't. They're a huge investment, and you probably hired them for a very good reason. So don't think you're going to replace them. Just give them a superpower.
I can't remember the author, but there's an author who said, what is it? Culture eats strategy for business. And, it's really about fostering the right culture in your organization, getting your people on board, getting everyone swimming in the same direction, having that great alignment. And then you're all after a specific mission with the same core values that's going to help you get there. It sounds like AI can kind of help you get to your destination, but you're still going to need to surround it with great people.
Absolutely.
No matter how much you invest in AI.
Absolutely. Yes, I think that's a really good analogy.
Well, awesome, Kellye. Thank you so much for all the time you spent with me today. I feel like we kind of went all over the place.
That's how it goes with generative AI. It is kind of all over the place right now. But the best place to start is just to start. A lot of people are still sitting in the stands and they don't even know that the AI race is happening. Or if they do, they're just vaguely interested and they're still sitting in the stands, maybe paying attention, maybe not. But those who get out of the stands and just get on the track are already going to lap everybody else in the stands, and there's no catching up. So just get on the track. You don't have to be in first place. You don't even have to be in 100th place, because there's going to be millions running that race. But if you'll just start running the race today, and just do it by playing. It doesn't have to be serious. It doesn't have to be life-changing. It doesn't have to, turn your entire company around. Just do some personal things that are tripping you up during the day, things that you want to get off your plate. And that's how you get in the race. And then it gets easier once you're on the track. And again, that's why I love to surround myself with other people who are also learning, because it's just more fun to run with others.
Yeah, I like your thinking. The challenge for anything, kind of wrapping up our appointment is just kind of figuring what's the most important takeaway here. And I hear you kind of saying, start small and experiment, and you kind of had a whole bunch of great points out there for getting started early on in our conversation. But at least getting something on the board and starting the learning process is going to help you do all the other stuff.
Right. And even doing fun things. I mean, you're still learning how to use the tool even when you're doing something fun. So I tell people, go open up your refrigerator and take a picture and upload that photo into ChatGPT and ask it what's for dinner. And it will give you a
nice.
whole meal with recipes and instructions and everything. So even though it's not solving your business's biggest challenge, you're learning that generative AI can analyze a photo and give you really good results. And you can take that skill now and you can translate that to your business. So I give everybody 100% permission to go play and not take it so seriously. And you're still going to be learning as you're playing.
I've seen some that are like plan your vacation and other kinds of things where someone's built out a GPT for a specific thing that people might need. Are there any others that you recall seeing that you think would be fun little things for somebody to get a personal taste of it, to kind of excite them for the business case?
I literally use it all day, every day for everything in my life. So my mother, who's 88, I've taught her how to use it as well. She uses it all day, every day as well. She wanted to install a landline in her phone just because it's sometimes easier. You don't have to charge it and all of that.
Oh, yeah.
And she had called the phone company and they said, well, we'll put you on the list. It'll be 3 weeks before we get out there. We're going to charge you $100 just to come out and look at the kind of jack you have. And my mother, being very smart and quite savvy now because she knows ChatGPT, she goes, you know what? I bet I could install this thing myself. And so she took a picture of her wall jack. She uploaded the photo to ChatGPT and said, what is it going to take to install my own phone line? And it gave her step-by-step directions. And within 5 minutes, it was done. And it didn't cost her $100 in 3 weeks. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And she's amazing at it. And she's not technical. She's not particularly savvy, because that's the beauty, is you just talk to it like it's a person. So if she can do it, anyone can do it. And just have, I think the biggest thing is just have a conversation and tell these large language models what it is you want, what you're trying to accomplish, give it a little bit of context, and just see what happens, just see what happens.
Awesome. Well, Kellye, thanks so much for sharing. And I just want to remind everyone, Kellye had some great advice. Get your AI answering whatever questions you have instead of Google or YouTube. Instead of using a search engine, get out there and start prompting, start querying, and learn from trying. You're only going to get better by trying. You're only going to understand more by trying. You have to fail a little to be very successful, and I love it. Now, if people want to reach out to you, how can they reach you?
Sure. They can reach me on my website, which is www.SourceKamp, SOURCE, Kamp with a K. That's my last name, so KAMP. Or info@SourceKamp is my email address, and they can reach me there as well.
Okay. We'll make sure and get those in the show notes, as well as my information. You can always reach me at the doctor at fulcrumgroup.net, or my LinkedIn page, Steve Meek, CISSP, out in the general area. Any other questions or comments before we stop here, Kellye?
I don't think so. I just really want people to go play and just go try. And the good news is you can't break it, and it's not going to judge you. That was my biggest first aha moment, was, wow, I didn't understand that answer the first time. I could ask it 5 different times, 5 different ways to explain it to me in a different way. I could tell it to explain it to me like I'm 15 years old or 5 years old. And it doesn't judge me when I ask it questions. So that's why I say just go play. You're not going to break anything. You're not going to be judged for your questions. If you're not a great prompter yet, that's okay. You can ask it to help you be a better prompter, and it will give you ideas, which is pretty amazing. So just go play and go use it and test the boundaries.
Go play. That's you heard it right here. The doctor, they talk about weight loss and everything else, but now we're saying go play, and you heard it direct from Kellye Kamp. So thanks a lot, Kellye, and I think that's all that we have for today. You can also look for us on our Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is that you consume your podcast information. But that's all I have for today. Thanks, Kellye, our guest, and the doctor is out. We'll see you next time. Take care.